Let me move on to my next guest today. And I was looking at a press release a few days ago at Insight and came across an announcement of a grant opportunity. The announcement said calling all change makers, and it announced what's called social impact grants of up to $5,000 available to developers start your initiatives. And what was cool, what was surprising and cool about this is that it came from the consulate of Israel, the Consulate General of Israel to the Midwest. So I'm pleased to have the Deputy Consul General with me today. Dr. Daniel Aschheim is here. He is serving as Deputy Consul General at the Consulate General of Israel to the Midwest. He was appointed to this Chicago-based post in September of 2020, where he assumed the role as consul for public diplomacy, serving as a spokesperson for the consulate's 9-state Midwestern region. I've got a very impressive resume about him. I'm not going to read it. I'll ask him about it over the course of this conversation, but it's my pleasure to have you on the conversation. Dr. Aschheim, good afternoon. Welcome to Conversations with Al McFarlane.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Al, for inviting us. And we were very excited that you saw it immediately after we sent it out. So I hope.
I saw it within minutes, and I said, boy, this is what intrigued me was that it was in my layman's viewpoint, you can correct me, this is a work of the government of Israel, or an extension of the government of Israel, talking about and promoting diversity and inclusion. I was surprised. So I started with that and I reached out immediately. Let's talk about this. So tell me about it.
Great. So first of all, it's very important for us to emphasize the state of Israel and the United States. We have a long-term partnership, which is based on values, based on many, many different things. But people sometimes forget that besides the political ties, security ties, and the other diplomatic ties, we really try and build people-to-people relationships. And for Israel, it's number one priority to try and reach out to communities, to friends, and really encourage programs that are connecting, as you say, diversity, equity, inclusion. This is part of the Israeli goal in order to reach out to as many partners on the ground. So really, we are encouraging through this grant program, social activists, people who want to make change in their communities, whether in food security, equity, whether it's in environmental issues, in diversity, social justice issues, public health, all of these fields, we are saying we are here to help you, help your communities. We are partnering with you. We are here as the State of Israel, as the Consulate General of Israel to the Midwest. We are reaching out especially to our friends in Minnesota. And we are giving priority to applicants from the state of Minnesota. We're giving up to $5,000 grants for small organizations, medium-sized organizations. We want grassroots work and we want to promote it because Israel believes in diversity. Israel is a diverse society. And as President Biden just said, this is the most diverse government in Israeli history. And we're implementing that on the ground here.
What's been the reaction so far? Number one, has this initiative been done before, or is this new?
So as far as I know, it's the first time that we are doing it, for sure, the Consulate General of Israel to the Midwest. Nevertheless, I do not know of the exact same program, and this is a pilot program. So we are very, very excited. I'm excited both on a personal level, on an institutional level, and I believe that this is really building true partnership between the people. And we've got great responses coming out, actually for many Midwestern states asking, is it only for the people in Minnesota? We said not only, but we are giving priority because we think there are so many potential programs and projects that we heard from people, whether with the African-American community, whether with the Hispanic community, whether with just people who would like to implement programs in environmental health. And it's very important for me to say, for the State of Israel, the relationship with the African-American community, of course, there are long-term history ties between the Jewish people and the African-American, but we are saying something very important here. Mm-hmm. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, when he walked with Rabbi Heschel in the civil rights movement, it's very nice, very important, but that's history. We are saying we are here now. We are here not only to discuss history, but look at the future together, hand in hand, and do it not by only lip service, but actual things on the ground. And therefore, we came up with this initiative. This is one thing that we're doing. We're working also in Detroit, in Illinois, and Wisconsin, and other programs with the community, together with the community. We are working side by side with them. And here we are really calling on people who don't have a connection to Israel, who do have a connection, who don't know anything about Israel. All of it is okay. We are here to help you in your goals and your tasks.
Tell me your background. You got a fascinating background. I looked in your bio. It says you were once the concierge at the hotel, King David Hotel in Jerusalem, right? And how do you get from there to here as a PhD educator and leader and a deputy consul general?
You know, Al, thank you for asking. I get that asked quite often. And what I always say, that was the best preparation I could get to the diplomatic world. And I really believe in that. I served 5 years at the concierge at one of the top hotels in the world, it's considered. We had presidents, kings, queens, Hollywood stars. But that's one part. But you're also working with all the system. You work with the taxi drivers, with the chefs, with the restaurant, with everything that needs to be done. And I think you learn diplomacy, you learn political work, you learn how to move on with projects. And then before I came here, I also served 2 years as a deputy Israeli ambassador to Senegal, West Africa, responsible for 5 sub-Saharan countries, most of them Muslim, which was a fascinating, challenging, interesting experience as an Israeli diplomat. And a lot of the initiatives we did there, working together with the population to understand what are their needs and then address them, is something that you need to be very humble and not tell the other side you know what's better for them, but we work together with them. And this is another part of this initiative, coming to the people of Minnesota, telling them what is that you need and how can we be of help, and not us telling them what we think they need, but we're working together as partners on this.
You might have caught the first part of the program, Dr. Aschheim, but I talked with the Midwest or the Minnesota president of Bank of America, and I raised the question about the impact of the George Floyd incident on that bank's relationship with the Black community, and also their partner organization and community, an arts organization called Juxtaposition Arts. And I want to raise the same question in general to you. I'm curious about how the world looked at George Floyd and how and whether what happened here informs in any way your decision, your desire to go deeper, go further, or to go back to where you've already created, pathways in promoting and lifting up equality, access. I say that to say I acknowledge the critical and important and historical relationships between Black Americans and Jewish Americans in the civil rights movement. Foundational, critical, important. I think we went through periods where we were closer and then farther apart and closer again. But I think at the core of it was a common vision of what human possibility and aspiration could be, and a commitment to that for all human beings. What are your thoughts?
Thank you for the question, Al. It's a very important point that we are doing this for the sake of humanity. And I think humanitarian issues and the justice for every person, regardless of his race, her race, gender, religion, all of that, every human is born human, and we are all born equal. And I actually personally visited Minneapolis and St. Paul 3 months ago. And I also visited the site of George Floyd to see what is the remembrance thing. And then from my conversations with people, it was really something that was there. But it was not only George Floyd as the incident, but as you mentioned, Al, this is a much bigger thing. And people talk to me about what is problematic for them. What are their difficulties in life, whether it's connected to food security, healthcare, diversity, education gaps, things that they felt that these are their challenges. And we work on all levels to provide what Israel can do to assist with our know-how together with local community leaders, whether it's here, again, as I mentioned, in Illinois, we're working in Bronzeville, South Chicago, with the African-American Pastor Harris, the leaders of the community, with trauma resilience and how to build community resilience, trauma treatment, post-traumatic treatment, and more. And from understanding these are humanitarian reasons, and the state of Israel emphasizes that and really believes that the way we can all, as humanity, overcome these issues is using our know-hows, every country's added value, every population. So Israel, I can't say that we know better than you do, or you know better than us. I think everyone have their different angles and can assist in order to develop the best things for humanity through really being an inclusive society that really embraces diversity. And this is part of this grant. So I think based on what you said, I said we want to work everywhere. We'll continue. It's not because of George Floyd. We worked before also in Minnesota, and we worked with other Midwestern states. But I think it's time together to work as groups. And the more we work together, the united we are, the more we can develop ourselves. And I call all of you to apply, wherever you know, to spread the word.
Let people know how to apply. We got a few minutes more. I don't know how your time is, but I want to spend more time with you. Okay, great. I want to spend more time. I'm enjoying the conversation, first of all, and I thank you for being here. I thank and applaud you for the initiative. I'm talking to Dr. Daniel Aschheim. He's the Deputy Consulate General of Israel to the Midwest, and his office in Chicago serves 9 Midwestern states, including Minnesota. And we're here because I got a press release about the initiative to support social impact initiatives. They've created a social impact grant, and they're inviting people in the 9-state region, but particularly in Minnesota, they emphasize Minnesota, to apply for funding for up to $5,000 of programs committed to creating social impact in new ways or through maintaining existing social programs. And the social impact grant recipients have the opportunity to create a global network of change makers across various social issues. And I wanted Dr. Aschheim to let people know how they apply. Who do they reach out to and bring their idea forward?
So please, call me Daniel. So thank you very much for the question again. So who we are trying to reach out. First of all, we are sending it to every partner organization that we've worked with before. We believe in long-term sustainable partnerships. Not only, we don't like the hit and run, sometimes coming, saying we are doing part, we really want to do long-term change. So we're starting with existing partners that we know. We're asking everyone we know in Minnesota really to spread the word, to identify people who they know are leaders in their community, people who really are change makers and are aspiring to become change makers, whether they're a 16-year-old in high school, whether they're already an established non-governmental organization, whether they're a certified 501 non-profit organization status. We are trying to reach out and really find those who want to make change and improve their societies, improve their life in any of the fields that I mentioned, and you read it correctly before. So we're really focusing on advancing and mitigating the effects of these social issues: environment, public health, food security, education, diversity, social justice, and all of these topics. So whoever thinks they are relevant or they know someone, please, please, please apply. We can guarantee that we'll look into it. There's nothing already scheduled in advance. It's completely open. And the best ones, the things that we see the most potential in, are those who will get the grants.
You mentioned that you were in Senegal. You came here from Dakar, Senegal. You worked for 2 years, I think, representing the nation of Israel in a region of several African countries. And I was curious when you said that a number of the countries that you connected with were Muslim countries. How did that go? What were the challenges of being an Israeli and working with, creating a diplomatic relationship with Muslim countries in West Africa?
I think it was a phenomenal experience. And I think that's something that it's so hard to describe, because the differences between, for many people, they say, you're served in Africa. They tell me, yeah, I have a friend in South Africa. I tell them that it's closer to fly to New York from Senegal than to South Africa from Senegal. It's a huge continent. And even in our jurisdiction of the 5 countries that I served, we had a Gambia. It's a tiny country, 98% Muslim, in the middle of Senegal, that spoke English. It was a former British colony. As opposed to Senegal, it was French-speaking. And we had Guinea-Bissau, Portuguese-speaking. So each one had different characteristics. And I think the fascinating thing was to see also a very unique form of Islam, which is the Sufi Islam in West Africa, very inclusive, very promoting diversity and religious tolerance, which I think with a lot of the activities we did there were interreligious dialogues, bringing Muslims, Jews, and Christians sitting together and discussing. So we worked in the churches, we worked in the mosques, and we didn't have a synagogue there, but we brought rabbis to come in for discussions. And I think to see the challenges, of course, there are challenges sometimes. We need to tell the Israeli story to people who sometimes haven't heard so much or heard things which are not always the most positive. And we try to, again, form people-to-people relationship. One of our key efforts there we identified was, besides helping in agriculture, was using the Israeli know-how, helping building the ecosystem for innovation and making Senegal the startup nation of Africa by 2025. And we really worked very intensively to do that. And I'm very proud of our achievements there. And hopefully it will happen. But it's challenging, yes, but very, very rewarding.
So what's the political landscape or the social landscape that you're operating with now in this country? I looked at your newsletter online, just getting ready to talk to you. And one of the headlines was, is it possible to be progressive, liberal, progressive, and something else? But the picture was
pro-Israel, yes.
And pro-Israel, right. So how do you, I didn't read the article, but the headline intrigued me. How do you answer that question?
So Al, I'll make it short. The answer is yes, you can be. Nevertheless, the longer answer is that it's a very unfortunate situation. And this was done in the last, I would say, decade. That so-called pro-Palestinian organization, and I'm saying so-called because a lot of the times, unfortunately, we see that they're working harder on bashing Israel than promoting the rights of the Palestinian people, who I think their lives should be improved. So I feel for them, but I feel very sorry when people in the middle of Chicago, when Hamas terrorist organizations shoot rockets at Israeli civilians, Arabs or Jews alike, and we see Hamas flags in the middle of Chicago. This is something that worries me. And I say this is not helpful, not for the Palestinian people, and definitely not for peace. And we see that they tried building this false equation that you can either be progressive liberal and support Black Lives Matter, support LGBTQ rights, environment thing, but you cannot also support Israel. And we are saying on the contrary here. Israel is diversity. Diversity, you asked me, Al, before about the King David. Can I just give you a story about the King David?
My boss, yeah, absolutely.
My boss was an Arab Christian woman. My 2 colleagues were Muslim men from East Jerusalem. I had another bellboy who was so-called a settler or a Jew, religious Jew, living in the West Bank. And it sounds like a beginning, and we had someone cleaning the dishes who came from Sudan. Now, it sounds like a beginning of a joke, but we were really best friends. But I don't want to glorify it. I just want to say that at times it was very challenging and difficult. But when you know what's going on in Israeli reality, and you see that people are living together in the government today of Israel. So this is a personal story, but look at the Israeli government. Israeli government has religious and secular Jews, right and left wing. They have Druze, which is an ethnic minority, members of the coalition, and we are the first time in Israeli history that the head of the Interior Committee of the Israeli Parliament, the Knesset, is a member of the Islamic Brotherhood Party, Ra'am, which is the Arab party in the coalition, first time in Israeli history. So these are things that I think are not emphasized. We have an Ethiopian-born Jewish minister of absorption. So I think these are things just to show the people who are trying to portray Israel as some kind of a negative entity, to say Israel the diversity in Israel is not only a soundbite, it's Israel. And this is important to tell everyone who listens to us today.
I had reached out to the consulate first about a year ago, I think, when I got a press release announcing that one of your team members, I can't remember her name, but I did look on your website and I saw a picture, but an African woman was part of your team in Chicago. And maybe she was arriving then. I don't remember the exact event, but the image captured my curiosity because I didn't think so much about an African presence in Israel, except for what I had read about the Ethiopians who had migrated to Israel and other groups, and there were African Americans who called themselves New or Hebrews, Black Hebrews. So I was curious to see how that happens and what reactions you get from people like me when they're curious about what that means.
So her name, yeah, actually, she was a great colleague of mine. She just left back to Israel in August. Her name is Consul Daniel Daniel. She was born in Ethiopia, as you said, and she came here. And it's true, at times when we came and we heard slogans before that Israel is not diverse, that Israel is white people. And we tell them, look, saying Israel is white, European white people, more than 55% of Israeli population came from either the Middle East or Africa, North Africa, Morocco, Algeria, Tunis, Iraq, Egypt, really all over the Middle East. So a lot of them are Jewish, not all are Jewish. And yes, so we had also the Ethiopian Jewish community who immigrated to Israel and are now members of parliament, are doctors, are everywhere in the foreign ministry. And the face that people ask us, are there Black Jews? We said, what do you mean? They're brown, they're Black. There are all kinds of Jews and all kinds of people who are not Jews living in Israel together. So I think the more exposure we have, the more conversations like you are bringing me on, Al, and I highly appreciate this opportunity that we are speaking not only after a military operation, but we are just talking about things that are interesting to the public in Minnesota and the people in Israel, the people to people that are care about their daily lives. And we are keen on talking about any topic, but I think it's very important to have these opportunities to really engage and ask the questions that are interesting for you. And for me also hearing them.
There was a kid that I knew from when he was a baby, a child. He's the son of one of my best friends and colleagues. The dad is Reverend Alfred Babington Johnson. He's a leader in the economic and cultural and spiritual community here. And his son, he told me, had converted to Judaism and has actually gone to Israel and is in Israel now. Wow. And I happened to look into Google. I think I Googled the son, and he's a rapper, but I think he's a lawyer. He was a football star athlete in college. And I think he went on to get a degree in law, but somehow decided to actually immigrate to Israel. And I don't have the full story, but I read a couple of things about him.
Al, I'll give you a secret.
Yes.
I'll tell you a secret just between us, me and you and the listeners. He was asked him that he used to come to the King David all the time for meetings. He was the coolest thing we have ever seen. Everyone loved. I know exactly who you're talking about.
Okay.
And his story was a phenomenal story that everyone should listen to. It's such an interesting story. The person is fascinating. He's fun. He's cool, and his personal story is so exciting. So you're exactly on that, and I know exactly what you're talking about.
And he's a brilliant young man. He has a family that is a legacy family here in Minnesota and actually in the country. But I'm excited for him, for his developing as an individual and his arriving at what is consciousness for him, right? And that arrival has placed him in Israel. I'm not sure if he's still there or not, but he's gained some visibility in the process. Listen, Daniel, I want to thank you so much for hanging out with me. I want to take the last couple of minutes again to invite people here in Minnesota to be aware of and apply for the social impact grant that you all are presenting.
So thank you very much, Al. And yes, as you just mentioned, we really call on all of you to apply. The way to apply, I don't know if you could put the link, Al. We sent you the link. If not, I'll just say to people, you can get into the Israel in Chicago, either Facebook page, either Instagram. It's in the highlights. You can follow us on LinkedIn or Twitter. It's there. The link is there. There's a landing page with all the information. So Israel in Chicago, social media, or my personal profile, Daniel Aschheim. You can find it there, or anyone at the consulate will be happy to share it with you if you have any questions. There's a person to ask all the questions there. So really, we invite you all to apply. Al, if you know someone, please send them to us.
I do know people, and I'm going to send them to you. I'm so glad to meet you, Dan. And let's make this the first, not the last of our conversations. I'm interested in just exploring, kicking it around, as we say, right? And just two guys talking, I think it's important. We need to do that. Thank you so very, very much. Have a great day.
Thank you. Anytime, Al. Thank you very much. Take care, and we'll be in touch.
Okay, great.